This is a true horror story, and I want to be clear before I start. I've thought a long time about whether to share this. I'm not looking for attention. I'm sharing it because I think it could help someone. And because, honestly, keeping it to myself hasn't made it any easier to sleep. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that this happened in Portland, Oregon, about 14 months ago, and it changed the way I move through the world. I was 24. I just started a remote job and relocated from the Midwest, Columbus, Ohio, to Portland for a fresh start. New city, didn't know many people, tight budget. I found a studio apartment on a short-term rental platform. Not Airbnb exactly, but similar. One of those newer apps where private landlords list their own places. The listing looked perfect. Clean hardwood floors, a big window facing the street, exposed brick. The photos were warm and well lit. The price was low for the area, like noticeably low. But the host's profile had a handful of good reviews and a verified badge. His name on the profile was David C. I messaged him, got a quick response. Friendly, professional. Said the price was low because he was trying to build reviews on the platform. That made sense to me. I paid the deposit, signed the digital lease, and moved in on a Tuesday in September. The first few days were fine. The apartment was exactly like the photos, small but cozy. The building had a buzzer system, a locked main door, and I had my own deadbolt. I felt safe enough. The first thing I noticed, and I almost didn't register it as strange, was on my third night there. It was maybe 11 p.m. I'd just gotten out of the shower and I was standing in the main room, combing out my wet hair, when I looked up at the smoke detector on the ceiling. Standard white plastic disc mounted near the center of the room. Nothing unusual about it, except there was a small red light blinking inside it. I stood there for a second, just looking. The blink was slow, maybe once every 4 or 5 seconds. I told myself it was the low battery indicator. I knew some smoke detectors do that. I made a mental note to mention it to the landlord and went to bed. But the next morning I woke up and looked at it again, and something about it nagged at me. The blinking felt too steady, too deliberate. Battery warnings are usually more erratic, more urgent. This was like a pulse. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was in a new city. I was already a little anxious. I let it go. That Friday, David texted to check in. I told him the apartment was great, just mentioned the smoke detector light. He responded within 2 minutes, said it was look into it, said it was probably just a sensor issue, said he might need to come by sometime next week to check it out. Normal enough. Except he said, almost like an afterthought at the end of the message, "Did you end up going out at all this week, or mostly staying in?" I stared at that for a while. It was such a casual question, the kind of thing a friendly landlord might ask, making conversation. But he'd mentioned nothing about my schedule in any of our previous messages. I hadn't told him I worked from home. I hadn't told him I'd barely left the apartment since Tuesday. And yet, somehow, he seemed to know I'd mostly been staying in. I typed back something vague, said I'd been unpacking, had a few errands. He said, of course, makes sense for the first week. The conversation moved on, and I convinced myself I was reading too much into it. Maybe he'd just assumed. New tenant, new city, settling in. That's a logical guess. But it stayed with me. That Sunday, I went out to get groceries. I was gone for maybe 2 hours. When I came back, something felt slightly off, the way a room feels when someone's been in it. I couldn't name what exactly. A drawer that I thought I'd closed was open about half an inch. A book on my nightstand seemed turned at a different angle. Small things, the kind of things you second-guess immediately. I sat on my bed for a while, just thinking, and then I looked at the smoke detector again. I got a chair, stepped up on it, and held my phone flashlight up close to the device. The lens was nearly invisible, small, dark, recessed.
But it was there, a tiny camera eye positioned to capture most of the room. My hands started shaking. I got down off the chair and stood in the middle of the room and tried to think clearly. I was alone. The building had one entrance with a buzzer. David had a master key. My phone showed 2 bars of signal. I took a breath and did something I'm still glad I did instead of just running out of there. I didn't touch the device. I didn't tip him off. I went into the bathroom, the one room in the apartment without a smoke detector, sat on the floor and called a friend back in Columbus. Her name is Mara. She stayed on the phone with me for the next 2 hours. She helped me think it through. We looked up the app's emergency contact policy. She Googled the landlord's name and the address. And then she found something. A Reddit thread from 8 months earlier. A woman who'd stayed in the same apartment. She'd mentioned the light in the smoke detector too, but hadn't thought much of it. She'd mentioned in the comments feeling like the host knew too much about her routine. She'd chalked it up to a weird vibe and left a 3-star review citing lack of privacy. That was it. That was all she'd said publicly. But in the comments, someone had replied asking if she'd ever contacted the platform about it. She said no, that she wasn't sure enough to make an accusation. I packed a bag. 1 bag, essentials. I didn't take everything because I didn't want to alert anyone who might be watching that I was leaving for good. I walked out at 9:47 p.m. on a Sunday, told myself I was going to get dinner. I took my laptop, my documents, my phone charger. I left the rest. I went to Mara's cousin's place across town, someone she'd called ahead for me. I didn't go back. The next morning, I filed a report with the Portland Police Bureau. The responding officer was polite, but seemed unsure how to categorize it. He noted that I hadn't actually removed or examined the device, so we had no physical evidence. He suggested I contact the rental platform, which I did. The platform launched an investigation. 3 weeks later, they sent me an email saying they had removed the listing and banned the account, citing a violation of privacy policies. They did not tell me what they found. They offered me a full refund and a discount on future stays. I never heard whether David was criminally charged. I searched his name for months. Nothing came up. Somewhere out there is a man who knows what I look like when I sleep, when I change, when I walk around my apartment thinking no one is watching, and he still has that footage.
I live in a different city now. I'll scan every rental before I unpack. I check smoke detectors, air purifiers, alarm clocks, anything with a small hole that could fit a lens. I do it the way some people check under the bed, automatically, without thinking too much about it. The thing is, what makes it so hard to shake isn't the footage, it's the Friday text. Did you end up going out at all this week, or mostly staying in? He already knew the answer. He was just seeing how I'd respond, and I answered honestly, like a person who had no idea she was being watched, because I didn't. I still think about that sometimes, about how normal he seemed, how the listing had real reviews, how the apartment had real hardwood floors and a big window and exposed brick, just like the photos. The camera wasn't hidden very well, but I almost missed it anyway. And that's the part that stays with me. Not that he was good at hiding it, but that I wasn't looking.